National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, NACCA, is pleased to speak with NACCA's CEO, Shannin Metatawabin. Shannin, I just want to say hello, and it's great to see you.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you, Andre. It's been a while, and I'm looking forward to our chat today.
For our viewers, Shannin is Cree Inunnau from Fort Albany First Nation of the Mushkegowuk Nation. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Carleton University and an Aboriginal Economic Development Certificate from the University of Waterloo. He previously served as the Executive Director of the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation and the Manager of Aboriginal Affairs and Sustainability with De Beers Canada. Shannin and his wife, Sienna, of the White Bear Sakamay First Nations in Saskatchewan, reside in PEI with their 4 children. What a great background. You really, you've done some amazing work in your career.
I have. I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked in government, the private sector, and the Indigenous organizations, and I always try to mix it up. Make sure we have that right experience so that we understand all processes. Yeah.
And you know, these past 2 years of COVID-19, through these, what are some of the main accomplishments that NACCA, your latest endeavor, has accomplished during these challenging times?
Well, right when COVID hit, we were just officially announcing the creation of an Indigenous Growth Fund, which is going to be the largest social finance fund created to provide capital to the Indigenous business. It would allow AFIs, 59, covering coast to coast in Canada, that are members of NACCA, to continue delivering and developing businesses within their regions by having the right capital now available to them. They have been managing a scarcity of capital for far too long. Lots of them are celebrating 35 years in business, but they've never had the right capital to become truly sustainable. Now, this fund that we launched has now officially been launched. It launched in April of this year, and we're actually going to deploy it later this fall. So our AFIs will now be starting to access this money, and they will in start to deploy that to their businesses. Now, the hope is that they increase their lending sizes, their lending limits, so that they can start participating and supporting businesses that are larger in scale, more complex, because that's what we're seeing with our lending across the board, is that our businesses are no longer just service type businesses that might have been what was earlier on supported. We're getting into more complex, more larger Indigenous owned businesses all across this country. So by having this capital source, then they'll be able to do more. What we've done since the COVID started as well is we deployed an emergency lending program throughout the AFIs that provided Indigenous businesses with a means to maintain their operations by pausing operations that were having to stop because of being shut down, and providing a loan to them that included some non-repayable to ensure that they remained in business. And then as we're starting to see us rebounding, they are able to get back into business. So those are a couple of things that we've done over the last couple of years. And we're also working on launching a charity, which is going to be the Indigenous Prosperity Foundation, which is going to allow us to create some bigger partnerships and provide opportunities for our Aboriginal financial institutions to support the business development, business support services, capacities, services within the community.
Wow, that's exciting. Now, from your business perspective, purely, and this is just a real hypothetical, do you see, we are coming out of COVID-19 by the grace of the Creator, right? Do you foresee, like maybe possibly, an explosion of Aboriginal business across the country?
Well, we've always had that opportunity. Like Indigenous businesses have been in place, and building the narrative to present it as an opportunity to our people has been something that we're getting more and more used to seeing. There's more and more organizations that support Indigenous businesses. There's programs that we deliver that support Indigenous businesses. We had this emergency program to support the existing businesses, but always within mind that we're creating this fund to support Indigenous businesses starting, expanding, purchasing, to cover all aspects of service and needs within Canada. And we anticipate that as soon as the economy is back and running, that we are going to see an uptake of people starting businesses, because the world is a different place. Not everybody's going to return to the jobs that they had before. So creating a business is something that everybody's going to consider.
Wow. The Indigenous Growth Fund, how did it come about, and how did you partner NACCA with the Indigenous Growth Fund?
Okay, so when I first was brought on to NACCA, one of the biggest goals that was presented to me by the board was to find capital. Capital has always been a need by the AFI network, and they've been trying to access capital for 20 years. And generally their approach has been wait for government to provide a capital contribution so that we can add it to our loan portfolio. But that hasn't been a very good strategy to date. So looking at what is the opportunity out in the world right now, and we see that social impact investment is a growing area of investment. The number that I saw was $42 trillion being transferred by baby boomers to millennials. Millennials have different expectations of capital. They don't just look for the 7 to 10% return. They actually want a social impact from that money that they're going to be investing. So more and more investment equity companies, mutual funds are creating social impact funds so that the investments can be put into those funds, and they're allocated to activities and investments that have a social impact. Within the Indigenous community, I think we have nothing but social impact that we can provide, but it's making sure that you can align where the capital is in the social impact investment community and the Indigenous community. And I think NACCA, with our 59 Aboriginal financial institutions, are great intermediaries of that capital. So that's why we decided to create a fund. And it's taken this many years to put it together, because what you have to do is to demonstrate that it is possible, that we can manage and we are good administrators of money for future potential of prosperity. And so we partnered with the Business Development Bank of Canada, because this is their business. They have a capital department, and demonstrating to them that it makes good business sense to partner to deploy capital to the Indigenous community is going to benefit everybody and everybody in Canada. And along the way, we were able to convince Farm Credit Canada to also participate, and the EDC. So we've got some partners that are Crown corporations that will be the first investment into the fund, but we've got a growing list of social impact investment funds that want to also participate.
And what is an evergreen fund?
Most funds today have a start date and an end date that gives the investor the assurity that they know what they're going to earn throughout that lifespan of that fund. And then that fund has a specific purpose. If it's purchasing businesses, if it's investing into certain activities, there's going to be an understanding of my money is being used for this, I'm going to earn this kind of interest, and then it'll close off. The evergreen is essentially, it's a perpetually moving fund. It'll always be going. And what we've created is a new model in the fund that allows for certain investors to exit and new investors to enter. So it's just continually growing.
This is the word of the day, it seems. But what is reconciliation or economic reconciliation in your view?
I view reconciliation as more of a reclamation of our original wealth and prosperity that we had prior to contact. I always tell everybody that 95% of our population was wiped out with contact, whether through genocide, through disease. A vast majority of our people disappeared from this continent. We had trade routes. We had no need for the wealth. We were prosperous in that we had trading and we had relationships and we had the land. Ever since we were separated from that, we've seen this whole trend of poverty. The policies that tried to exterminate us still exist today. The children being found is a reminder that these policies existed and that we are not going anywhere. We've been vastly resilient. The fact that me and you are still standing here and that our ancestors went out of their way to survive and be resilient so that they can give us a chance, we're ingredients to reconciliation, because we have to reclaim that prosperity for our people and those not yet born. And my father always says that as we plan for those that are not yet born, that's our role in life right now. And my whole thing is to try to create that narrative that Canada is not going to have a future prosperity without Indigenous prosperity, because we have the rights and title to this land. And now we've got to share it.
All right, hold on. That is very wise. NACCA will present its Indigenous Prosperity Forum next year. What is the theme and importance of this forum?
Well, I think there hasn't been too many large gatherings of Indigenous people since COVID hit. We were anticipating having it in February, but the timing and planning does not work for that, especially with COVID still lingering through worldwide. But we anticipate by May that we will have an opportunity to have face-to-face, and I think everybody's going to be looking forward to it. Have an opportunity to visit and socialize, because as Indigenous people, this is really important to us, and I think a lot of us have missed this. And we're going to make this another monumental Indigenous prosperity forum. We had the last one had 500 people participate. We had rave reviews of everybody saying that they liked the speakers, they learned a lot. There's a lot of capital that actually transacted at our prosperity forum, something that we want to measure this time, where deals were being made right at the forum, which was amazing to see. This year, we want to promote export and recovery from COVID and youth Indigenous entrepreneurship.
Now, I love the name of the forum, Indigenous Prosperity. And, you know, I don't think it was that long ago where the institutionalized outlook was Indigenous prosperity. What's that? I think times are changing. Can you just share with us for a moment some of the barriers that were there that kept Indigenous people from that prosperity, which you so eloquently stated has really always been there? What were some of the barriers?
Well, the barriers continue to exist right now. We got to think about the residential school as a policy of government and a series of policies that were created to remove us from our lands. When you remove us from our lands and put into a little reserve created by the Indian Act, which is essentially kind of like a prison, removed from mainstream. And when you're removed from mainstream, you don't have access and opportunities like the rest of Canada. So we don't have capital. We definitely don't have generational wealth. Our health and our educational indicators are low. So those are also barriers. And we never had capital. So we never had access to capital. And by tackling one barrier at a time, we hope to take down all the barriers to allow Indigenous businesses to flourish. Now, this one tool of an Indigenous Growth Fund is providing a barrier, taking down one of the barriers with capital. But in order to enable that capital to truly go to work, you need to enable it. Now, the government after the Second World War created tax incentives. They created granting. They created employment and subsidized working for businesses to provide businesses that assistance, that push, so that they can be successful. And I think in the Indigenous community, we got to think about a lot of those enablers to be created to support Indigenous businesses to be able to utilize that growth fund. We've had this Aboriginal business program that provided a non-repayable equity contribution to a business for the last 30 years. That's been very successful. It used to be called Aboriginal Business Canada, you might remember. We administer that program now, and that supports almost every Indigenous business created, because what it does is buys down that risk, buys down the size of that loan, so that business is that much more successful. And it's been a vastly successful program, because what they found is that for every dollar provided in that grant, $1.20 to $1.40 is received by the Treasury Department in cost savings of social spend. So it's an actual investment. And so if we can look at providing Indigenous people with the supports that they need to be successful long-term and sustainable economic-wise as an investment, rather than this lens that everybody has that it's always a social spend, then that's going to be the biggest change. Indigenous Services Canada has spent less than 1% on economic development initiatives. All of it is social spend. If we can change the perception and the narrative on that to invest more, then everything changes.
Well, Shannon, I have to say that it sounds a lot like if mainstream Canadians would lower the barriers that they put on Indigenous business since contact. If they would lower their own barriers, they would lower the barrier to their own increased prosperity. And that is a kind of a lens that they have to start seeing the world through. They have to start seeing the world through the lens of Indigenous people's success that has always been there. And you and the work that NACCA is doing and this extraordinary new Indigenous Growth Fund, these are signals, big signals to the country that we're not going back, we're moving forward. Is there any final thoughts that you may want to share with us here today?
Well, I think you've seen in the last 20 years that major projects within Canada have slowed substantially. And part of the reason could be attributed to the uncertainty around the Indigenous question on land title, land rights. But there's been 285 court cases that affirm our rights and title. So you're seeing this vast amount of leverage that communities now recognize that they have, that gives them a little bit more of an assertion of their rights to projects and needing to be consulted and to seek their consent. So you've seen this through the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. You've seen this through different various conferences where corporations are wondering what the new rules are, so that they can start to plan for investment back into Canada. Foreign investment was 50% of what it was more 15 years ago. We want to attract foreign investment back to Canada, but that's not going to happen unless the government and the Canadian people get their heads around sharing prosperity with Indigenous people. If there's a sharing of prosperity with Indigenous people, so that we were actively consulted, we're actively involved in planning, and then we're participating in the project and even owning part of the project, you'd be vastly more successful with that project actually going through and materializing into a project. So I think that's where we're trying to change the focus and the lens to, as it's not so much an IBA and then you're good to go. Indigenous people want to share in the wealth. So they want to be part owners. They want to have business opportunities from that entity. They want the IBA for sure. They want the government to share part of the revenue from what is obtained from that resource project. So there's three different ways, businesses, IBAs, and revenue share.
All the very best with the Indigenous Prosperity Forum next year. I look forward to hearing more about that. Time flies, doesn't it? I mean, we're heading to that next year, and to increased prosperity across the board. Chi miigwech to you, my friend, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you for today.